Hello and welcome everyone to the third session of the Exoconscious Coaching progression. Today we're going to be talking more about childhood contact, how it influenced us, how we move through these experiences in childhood and then began to integrate them in adulthood. And today we're going to be speaking with Cindy Robinson. And I met Cindy in the mid-90s. We were both part of Dr. Ruth Hover's Experiencer group, where we would gather monthly in Fountain Hills, Arizona, and talk about our experiences and get updates from Ruth on what was happening in the world of ufology and UFOs and the politics and the sociology of it. Ruth at the time was also working with Dr. John Mack and Leo Sprinkle. The three of them were very influential in developing how psychologists, psychiatrists, sociologists worked with experiencers, how best to approach experiencers. And our group is made up, I'm probably tops 20 people, I would say. So Cindy has a very interesting background, not only as an experiencer that she's going to share with us, but also as an RN. She has a varied nursing background, and she's an inventor of some fascinating technology that we hope she'll get to tell us about also. And she was also a 1997 witness for the Phoenix Lights, the 1997 mass sighting in Phoenix, Arizona. Today, we're going to be talking about Cindy and what her childhood experiences were. So, Cindy, can you tell us a little bit about what happened during your childhood so that people could get an idea of what your experiences were, what it felt like to you, how old you were, where you were living at the time?
Yep, absolutely. So, just so everyone knows, my life with ETs and UFOs is very extensive. It started when I was 2 years old and still continues to this day. Plus, I have 5 children. I have 8 grandchildren and then great-grandchildren. And it seems like the whole UFO ET thing came from both my parents instead of just my mother, which is where I started. And then also I had events with her father, my grandfather. So, and out of those 26 grandchildren that he had, I was the only one that he took everywhere. So, and I'll get into the events that I had with him. But I also want to let everyone know that I have it's called like a photographic memory. And so when I do recall or I memorize, I have a memory of something, it's literally like it just happened. Most of the time I even remember like what I was wearing, my surroundings, everything. Okay, so I remember back when I first started at 2 years old. I had on this little furry red bathrobe and my pajamas. And I would stay with my grandfather he had a gasoline station. And he had what you would call like a bench seat type picture window in the office of that garage. And it had a big neon sign above it, right, open. But the interesting thing is that I would take my naps as that little 2-year-old on that bench seat. And I would remember looking at that neon light, which would buzz and flicker. And then it also happened to be this cobalt blue color, which seems to go along with my ET contact, this cobalt blue. And I mean, just to skip off a little bit, when my children were being visited by the ETs, there was always this cobalt blue light coming from under their bedroom door. And I knew not to interrupt. I had confidence and comfort as a mother that they were not going to be injured at all. So, going back to my time as the 2-year-old on this bench seat in the garage. So for me, at that time, there was what now you call missing time. So it would seem like during my nap time, there would be missing time. And so it was pretty interesting because I always would remember this buzzing, clicking sound as I would wake up. And then I would see this cobalt light. There was literally no ambient other sound. It was pure silence. And that's something recently remembered, that every time there's been this very deep silence, no ambient sound, which I think is something maybe we can study later on. So anyways, from 5 to 10 years old, so I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And my parents, my dad had a 2-bedroom, 800 square foot ranch, 1-bath house built. And we moved in when I was 5. And the 2 bedrooms, one faced the backyard, one faced the front. And the bedroom lights were these long horizontal rectangle windows. And I had a bunk bed because my mom was, my sister, who's 5 years younger than me, was ready to be born. So obviously she started out in a crib, but they wanted to plan ahead, right, for when we were sharing the bedroom. And I remember she put those bunk beds in the front bedroom under that window. And I would lay on that top bunk and watch for these UFOs, these ETs to come back. And sometimes, in the winter, because obviously Wisconsin gets deep winters, the ice would collect on the window and I would scrape it with my fingernail so I could see out. And I would just wait and wait. It wasn't something that happened every night, but it happened enough that I was familiar with it, comfortable with it. In fact, as I would search out that window waiting for them, I'd often say, "Where are my friends?" I called them my friends. So I had no fear, nothing. And so we'll skip to when my sister then is old enough to be in that bottom bunk. And we talked about this in depth, like a couple years ago. And I wanted to pick her brain because she's had some experiences, but not as extensive as mine. My brother, who is 10 years younger than me, also some experiences younger, and then as an adult when he had his own kids and wife, but not as extensive as what mine was. So obviously something happened where I was taken a lot. And when I talked with my sister, I always remembered again this cobalt blue light shining in the bedroom when they would come to take me. And I don't ever really remember going through walls, going through a window, but yet I felt like this separation or this floating sensation when it would happen. And as an adult, I do remember as I got older, the contact change. It seemed like they would take me like in a dream state or with your soul. So I could feel them like separating my body. When they would put me back a few times, like they put me back, like literally slammed me into my body. And it was very uncomfortable. It was then with those incidences, there were like 3 of them, where you wake up because of the pressure, and it's a deep pressure that you feel on your body. And there's like a paralysis. It seems like it lasts forever, but it's literally lasts just a few seconds, where you can only open your eyes, look around to see where you're at. You can't move anything, and after a while, I felt like it was giving me some kind of anxiety when it would happen. So I asked them, I go, most of my contact was with the Grays. And I asked them, I go, I will cooperate. I don't feel any fear with you. Please do not do that anymore, where I have the sleep paralysis and you slam me into my body. Well, they must have listened, because I never had any more incidences then after that. So again, that cobalt blue thing is something that I can't get rid of. For me, it was like an obsession, trying to get the color right. It's odd. Even when I bought my car, soon as I saw this car with this cobalt blue paint job, I told my husband, I go, oh, that's my car. To get back to my sister, she did always remember that cobalt blue coloring. And then she also remembers our conversation. I was almost between 10 and 12. And so my sister always wanted to sleep on the top bunk. When my mom okayed it, because she was old enough and I got the bottom bunk, it was funny because I told her, I said, oh, goody, you get to have the top bunk. Let them take you for a while so I can get some sleep. So she did remember me saying that as a kid, right? And like I said, she does remember some incidences, but it didn't matter whether I was on the top bunk or the bottom, they still would come get me. And my sister would often say that she would look over from the top as they were taking me, but she really doesn't remember what she saw. She remembers seeing little like gray beans, but that's it. And then the light in the room. And so I will say also, during our childhood in that 2-bedroom house, it was the weirdest thing. We would come home from school and my mother would have the bedrooms changed. She would put their bedroom at the front and then our bedroom in the back. So here's the bizarre thing. I don't ever remember anything happening in the bedroom facing the backyard. And then what's really odd, and my mother never had an answer for us because I asked, even as an adult. She just said, well, your dad preferred the back bedroom because it was more quiet. But it would only last maybe 2 weeks, and she'd have the bedroom changed around again. And then we'd be back in the front. And she'd always just say, well, your dad sleeps better in the back, facing the back. So whether or not it had something to do where they came to that bedroom and I wasn't there, it was my parents, I don't know. But I mean, they are passed away now. So I guess I'll have to wait till the afterlife to find out.
Did you have any childhood early recall of who the beings were, what they were doing when they took you? If you had any regression around that or any memory around that, but what their agenda was, why they picked you?
Yeah, really not until I was an adult did I really have the memories come flooding back. And it was really odd because it was in our group when we would be together. with people, and people would be talking about their experiences, messages, telepathic, right? And I do remember those even as a kid, being on these UFOs in these, they were massive rooms with dull lighting. And again, that weird luminescent blue color in the background on these UFOs. And I do remember it being cool in temperature because I would always feel a little chilled. And then, but yet a musty smell. But then as an adult, that is when we would talk as a group and something they would say would trigger a memory. And then, like Ruth said, she'd tell us, hurry up and write down the stuff, or we'd talk about it. I'd get home and I'd write down stuff. So most of the telepathic messages were about the earth. And it was weird. It was always like I was being shown like a movie. You know how like the old time movies, and there would be this clicking sound in the background. I do remember that. And then there'd just be flashes of scenes. And it would be, they would say, I go, why are you showing me this? And they would telepathically tell me it's to prepare you for the catastrophic events. And I'd always go, well, can I stop it? Isn't there a way to stop this? Or how do I prepare? And they'd always go, you need to save the children. And I was told that, wow, I think from I was in my teens, I remember them telling me that I needed to save the children. So then even as an adult, I still don't know. I mean, save the children, does that mean my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, or in general? But, as an adult, I did have events where I was taken by, I call them little brown dwarfy guys. And they would have these light brown, like burlap type robes on with the hoods. It was weird. We're all adults here. So I will say, as an adult, the one time, that was the only time I ever had anything with a connotation of a sexual connotation. And it really bothered me. I had to, the minute after that memory and that experience, I literally got on the phone and talked to my sister because I'm going, oh my God, what's happening? Because part of me, like I didn't want to believe that happened, but yet I know it happened. So there were a group, there were at least 5 or 6 little cloned girls there. And I say cloned because I wasn't sure if they were fully human. They actually had your color hair. They were very thin. They had on what I would call like a gray type clothing that just clung to their bodies. They had features of the grays. Their eyes were big almond eyes, but they were blue. And then these itty bitty tiny, like nostril noses, and the lips were very thin. And they would huddle by me, and they were afraid of this brown dwarfy guy. He came like, I'm 5'3", and his head came to like my chest. Because I remember I pushed him away. And at the time, as he was coming towards me, and the girls are kind of hovering around me and whimpering, and he was lifting the front of the robe. So here's the funny part, because I am a nurse. He had strapped on some bizarre mechanical type penis. And it seemed as if I was supposed to be intimidated by this movement. And I'll never forget, because it was like it just happened yesterday. I held him by his shoulders and shook him. And I said, "Get out of here. If you really think I'm intimidated by that, or I'm supposed to be afraid of you," I go, "I'm a nurse. I've seen everything."
So how old were you when that happened?
I was in my 40s. So, but it really bothered me, because I'd never had anything, even any dreams about sexual stuff. So it really, really bothered me. Like, oh my God, did this really happen? But yet I knew it happened. But it was only that one time. But I did see the little cloned girls on 2 other occasions. But that little dwarfy dude, I called him Ebens later on, as I described what they looked like, because he had little, like, spriggly, grayish hair strands sticking out from the hood. I do remember that.
So would these be Ebens like Linda Moulton Howe speaks of?
Yeah. Yeah, because when I talked with Cynthia Crawford, in fact, she even did a sculpture, and I would tell her what my vision was of that. And she made a sculpture, and when she showed me, I'm going, oh my God, yeah, for sure. That's it.
Cindy Robinson and I were in the group with Cindy Crawford, and Cindy Crawford's videos are on our Exoconscious Humans YouTube that we did with her before she passed away. So she was a good friend of ours, and Ruth has also passed away. So can we shift back to the 12 years old? And
yes, because this was an important event as well. So at 12 years old, my grandfather took me on the train to go to my aunt's wedding in Phoenix, Arizona. And I had cousins that lived there as well. And so we left from Chicago and took the train all the way to Phoenix, right? So, everything went on. There was nothing that I remember other than the wedding stuff, right? And on the way home, on that train ride home, my grandfather was feeling exhausted. So he paid to upgrade us to get a sleeping car. So in that train sleeping car, there's like bunk beds, again, the bunk beds. But my grandfather had a war injury from World War I. So he was sleeping on the bottom. I was on the top. And we were sleeping in there, and the little curtains were closed, so you get privacy or whatever. And I remember waking up. I know what woke me up. I woke up because the train had stopped. So as a kid, right, my grandfather was still sleeping. Climbed down the ladder, and I go to where the doorway is, where you can either go to the bathrooms or the doorway that goes, like to get off the train. And the conductor was standing there. And he went outside, and I'm watching him. He's just standing there. And I don't remember how much time went by, but all of a sudden he's motioning to me, come off the train. So I get off the train. I remember jumping down onto the ground, and it was dark, but almost like it would be right before dawn. And I remember it was very deserty, right? Nothing, no buildings, no nothing. But yet in the distance, I could see this gray silhouette of mountains. And they were far away. But then all of a sudden, I remembered the conductor explaining to me about the land, but I don't remember what he told me. I do remember as my grandfather called me then from the train, telling me, Cindy, what are you doing? Get in here. Well, you don't disobey my grandfather. So I went, but as I went to turn to go to him, the conductor bent down and picked up a rock. And it was enough to hold in my palm. And it was a dark speckled rock with black and sparkles in it. And he handed it to me and he goes, this is what they call fool's gold. So I took it with me. I did have that rock when I got off that train, and I put it in. I always had like a shoe box that I would keep tickets and mementos in. Unfortunately, when my parents retired, they threw all that stuff out. So, but anyways, ended up back in my bunk in the train. Nothing was ever said. I don't ever remember my grandfather saying to me, what were you doing out there? But I do remember that entire landscape that we were in. So now fast forward to when the moon landing occurred, right? And they jumped down onto that land of the moon. And I'm telling my husband, I'm looking at it because we're watching it live on TV. And I'm telling my husband, I'm going, John, I go, they're not on the moon. I was there. That's when I was with my grandfather and the train stopped. And he goes, what? So I explained to him what happened. And he goes, are you sure? And I go, yeah, this has to be fake. And even when I would tell this to adult friends of ours, right, they would get mad at me because that was a big US accomplishment. And I'm going, no, I was there. I remember the exact silhouette of the mountains they show on the moon landing. And it wasn't until a couple years ago, and I don't remember who it was that said to me, they go, Cindy, how do you know your ETs didn't take you to the moon? And I stopped to think about it and I'm going, oh, I never thought of that. So to this day, I still don't know. I have no clue. But then, I married at 18 and we jump forward to 1967, right? And then that started a whole new realm with my husband. My husband would be taken with me. It started 7 weeks into our marriage when we had time missing as we were going out to visit his brother and his wife. And we were on a rural road in Caledonia, Wisconsin. And it was on a Friday night. And this massive UFO was hovering between two telephone poles right above the wires. And it was an Indian summer night. That's why we went out for the drive, because in October, you can sometimes get snow. But it was October 6th, 1967. I remember it was a Friday night. And again, John had the window down. He had pulled off. He was in the Army. He worked on aircraft and helicopters during the Vietnam War. And he's looking at this, and he knew my history because I was honest with him. And he's looking at that and he's going, is that what you see all the time? And I go, well, this one seems like it's really big. And then it had like red, blue, and yellowish white, big round lights on the underneath. And they did a slow rotation. There was no sound, none. And in fact, that's where the silence comes in with these events. Neither John or I remembered him putting the car in park, shutting the radio off, nothing. All we remember is it was like we were looking at it and then we were like waking up from like a daydream. And we're going, whoa, we got to get your brother to go see this. And John's out on the road racing to go get his brother, which was another, 5, 6, 7 miles. But then as we went back to go look for it, nothing. We went all the way back to the airport in Milwaukee, turned back around. As we're going back out, guess what? Military is all in the field where we saw that, with big searchlights, jeeps, military men walking this massive perimeter in a circle. And John pulled over again, and we're going, what are they doing there? That's exactly where we were when we saw this. And all of a sudden, a jeep started coming towards John, and John, he goes, oh no, we're not staying here. And he took off, went back to the house. Now, ultimately, we were talking with his brother. We didn't understand that there was time missing, that's what it was called. We found that out years later. But we could document the time. We left our apartment, which was like about a 30-minute drive out there. And we left our apartment at about 6:45. We were looking at that at almost 7:30 at night. And then Tootsie and Ronnie claimed I was pulling them into the car at like after 9:30 p.m. And then as we were talking, I didn't realize what time it was, because they said to us, they go, well, we couldn't figure out why you were coming out for a visit so late. And I go, what do you mean late? I go, we left the apartment at like 6:45. It had to be like 7:30-ish. And they go, no, it was after 9:30. John and I looked at each other, So, but again, we didn't realize, as we're sitting there, I did make a phone call to the Air National Guard down by the airport to find out what was going on, or if anybody else called in anything. Of course, I got the typical gruff military old man response as I'm telling him what we saw. And, then all of a sudden, he's going, they're on maneuvers. And that's when I turned around in the kitchen to look on the clock above the stove, and it was midnight. And all I remember saying to that guy was, oh, sure, they're doing maneuvers on a Friday night at midnight. And I hung up. And I went back into the living room and I go, I can't believe it. It's really midnight. Thus, the talk then about how much time had elapsed. My husband and I got busy with family, so on and so forth. We never, ever could remember anything about that time missing in 1967. And so here it is, like 2000, whatever it was. And I'm at Diane's house and I get this regression done. And I think I was relaxed because I knew Ruth never was able to regress me. She claimed I'm one of those that can't be regressed or hypnotized. And so I was relaxed enough, I think, with Diane and Chuck. They did record it, they did notes, but they claimed as they brought me out of it, I remembered feeling almost like when I was taken. I remembered that like I was floating above my body. I remembered him counting me out. That's what I remember. But I remember feeling my body elevated. And then I couldn't literally bend my fingers or my toes, and my lips were even numb. And I'm trying to like move my arms and my fingers, and Diane's going, "What's the matter?" And I'm going, "Did I just fall asleep and take a nap?" And her and Chuck look at each other and they're going, "Really, Cindy?" And I go, "Yeah, nothing happened." But I said, "Why do I have this bizarre feeling like I'm numb, even with my lips? And my fingers are stiff, like I can't bend." And they go, "We don't know." But when we discussed what I had said, Chuck and Diane both said, on this time that John and I can't recall, we both put our hands up, or I put my hands up like this, and said they were teaching us how to steer the UFO, right? So ultimately, I was late getting home. John had been working at home, and I had called him and said, "I'm on my way." So when I got in the house, he goes, "What took you so long?" I was worried because I had my phone shut off so there wouldn't be interruptions. And I said, "Oh, we were doing this regression." And he goes, "About what?" And I said, from 1967, when we couldn't remember a time missing. And he looks at me and he goes, "What?" Put his hands up and he goes, "We were driving the UFO." I looked at him and I go, "What?" I go, "Now you remember?" But I had not given him any prompts, nothing. So seriously, and he was starting with the early signs of Alzheimer's at that time. So to me, that is proof that one, it happened. Two, there's no way he would understand. But again, how would that happen unless there's some kind of consciousness that crossed over? There's the mystery.
How would you define being an exoconscious human?
Well, I will be honest, when we started this group, and even when you started years ago using the term exoconscious, I didn't really understand that term. In my mind, I'm thinking exoconscious, like what? We're like not part of our human body, right? So I didn't really understand the concept. But then as we went through our classes and we really dived deep into our experiences and our memories and messages, I finally understood then the concept. So it truly is, I feel, this exoconscious experience. It's something that we experience at a human level, but yet at a soul level. And the reason I say soul level is because I have had 2 incidences of NDE, like a near-death experience. I will tell you, with those experiences, though, I remember again that silence, that peace, and that knowing you're okay, and yet deep, deep silence. That's the exoconsciousness. It hits me at my soul level.
In our groups, we have gone deep into what the meaning of a soul is. So for people watching this who maybe have had an experience or not had an experience or are just curious, what are some tools that could you give us a couple tools that you use to navigate this exoconscious reality that you've experienced during your life?
For me, because I know I get a lot of questions from people, and I have worked with people that are just terrified of these experiences. And that was my goal. I never had bad experiences. I did on a couple of occasions meet and was around some really icky, bad energy, draconian reptilians. There's different reptilians. People have to understand there's as many humans as there are. That's, if not more, ETs. People just have to get out of their head of what they feel this concept is of other beings. They really do. There's tons of them. That's all I can say. And as far as, like I said, never any bad experience. So I always felt calm with my experiences. And I would try to get that across to people that have this feeling of fear, violation. That was one thing, like people would talk about they were raped or violated with physical exams. But I would try to get them to look at it with a different perspective, not of fear, not of anger, to go past that. And what do we do with animals, biological things in our labs? I mean, they do experimental things on our animals as well, right? And perhaps my feeling is if they can get past the fear, they can gain a different perspective and perhaps gain some kind of knowledge message from that experience, that contact.
I think you also had a tool you used of saying that's enough.
Oh yeah, you do have that right. There's lots of people that can't handle it. They can say, I'm not doing this, I don't want this. And they are resistive. And so they don't have any other experiences. For me, I'm being honest. I welcomed it. I liked it. I can't explain why. Maybe it's my curiosity and my personality. I don't know. I love doing research as an adult now. So I was just always intrigued. So that tool, again, for me, was the calmness, the approach. If I felt they hurt me, I told them and asked them, please don't do that. And they would comply.
People are resonating with your experiences and your encounters. How can they get in touch with you and find out more about this work you're doing?
Absolutely. So, I mean, feel free to email me at lowercase letters C Robinson 26 at cox.net. I'm always open. I can talk to people. I Zoom meetings, Skype, whatever you want, FaceTime.
Thank you, Cindy. And also, if you didn't get that down, contact me and I can connect you with Cindy. So
yes,
yeah.
Yes, Rebecca has my permission. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Cindy. It was
Thank you for
excellent recounting of your childhood and this deep soul territory of exoconscious experiences. Thanks for bringing that to light to us. Thank you.
You're welcome.